Well, it is a real pleasure to be here with you this morning. Thank you so much for welcoming me. You know, anytime I'm in worship or I'm guest preaching somewhere where I'm worshiping in a new place, the Lord always reminds me that there are no strangers in the house of the Lord. So it's really wonderful to be in your midst today and to share this space with you, especially on such a celebratory day, Mother's Day. So I recently had breakfast with one of my girlfriends, and she's the mother of two boys, a 4-year-old that has autism, and then a 10-month-old that's developing neurotypically. And she was just sharing with me the joys, the extreme joys of motherhood, and also the struggles of motherhood. And when I was telling her I was preaching on Mother's Day, she said, oh yeah, she said, I once had a professor in seminary, a homiletics professor, and homiletics is just the art of preaching or writing sermons. And this particular professor equated sermon preparation to giving birth. I know, right? You'll see, hopefully it makes sense in just a second. But yeah, this particular professor said the preacher labors over the sermon, right? Minutes, hours, days, sometimes, not unlike some women in labor, right? You could be in days of labor. And then finally on Sunday, you give birth to the finished product. And so for those of you who have given birth, please, I'm in no way trying to minimize the physical and emotional toll that goes into bringing a life into this world. It was just merely an apt analogy for this morning, since it's Mother's Day, and I experienced a lot of angst in anticipation of this morning. So this is my finished product for you today. As I was laboring over this sermon, I thought a lot about the moms that I know in my own life, or that I've had the privilege of working with over the years. So I thought about my sister, who struggled for years and years to conceive and finally had to seek medical intervention to make that happen. I thought about my best friend, who is the mother of 4 children, ages 6 and under, so I'll let you imagine the chaos that her and her husband live in on a daily basis. I thought of my own mom, who was a single mom for most of my childhood. And I thought of my 94-year-old neighbor who recently said goodbye to her 72-year-old daughter, who was struggling with brain cancer for a long time. And I thought about all of the non-biological moms I've known, aunts, grandmas, foster moms, adoptive moms, stepmoms like myself, who don't have their own biological children, but in some way participate in the care of and the raising of children. And I thought about a lot of the moms I used to work with at my first real job out of college. So before I worked at FPU, Fresno Pacific University, I worked at an organization called EPU, Exceptional Parents Unlimited, which is now EPU Children's Center, and they're located in Fresno, California. And it's called an early intervention agency. And when I worked there, I was an early childhood specialist. And basically what I did was I worked with children 0 to 3 who had special needs or developmental delays. And so I would assess the child and kind of see where they were at developmentally, and then I would write a plan to get them on track, to help them reach their developmental milestones. And I did both center-based visits as well as home visits, and the moms were normally the ones that attended these weekly sessions. And so over the 7 years that I was there, I sat with moms every week, and I got to hear more of their stories. And moms from all different backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, family upbringings, education levels. And, I worked with moms who their dedication to their children moved me to tears. They embodied the very word sacrifice. I worked with moms who were grieving their child's special needs and the life that their child may have had, or they themselves may have had their child not received this type of diagnosis. I worked with moms who felt their child's special needs were a blessing from God, that who they were as a mom had been so shaped by the patience and dedication and perseverance they needed to raise this child, that they were thankful that God had given them a child who had special needs. But on the other end of the spectrum, I worked with moms who felt like their child's special needs were a curse from God, that somehow they were being punished for something they had done in their own life, and that God was kind of bringing judgment upon their child for their own past sins. I worked with adoptive moms, foster moms, working moms, teen moms, stepmoms, moms recovering from drug and alcohol addiction, aunts and grandmas that had been thrust into the role of mother because of life circumstances. I worked with moms that were moms of 1 child and moms that were a mom of 10. And the common thread, okay, between all of these mothers, they had their own unique individual stories. And they were all full of joy, sadness, gladness, fatigue, frustration, doubt, and hope. There are many stories of mothers in the Bible, and their stories are just as unique as the mothers I worked with at EPU. And to celebrate and honor Mother's Day this morning, we're going to look at a particular story from the biblical text, that of Samson's mother. Her story isn't prescriptive, okay? It's not a how-to about motherhood. It doesn't even represent the universal experience of motherhood. But it does give us a glimpse into one woman's experience and into one mother's story. And I believe her story, even though it's an ancient one, is one that we can still really understand and resonate with in our 21st century world. Whether we're currently moms, or whether we're moms in waiting, or whether we're moms to non-biological children, I really believe that the story of Samson's mother invites us to reflect on our own unique stories, but more than that, on how our own unique stories really intersect with God's larger plan. So let's take a look at Samson's mother's story. It's found in Judges chapter 13, and it should pop up, there it is, right behind me. So feel free to follow along with me on the screen, or you can pull out your Bibles, your phones. And we're going to start again, chapter 13, verse 2. There was a certain man of Zorah of the tribe of the Danites whose name was Manoah. His wife was barren, having borne no children. And the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, "Although you are barren, having borne no children, you shall conceive and bear a son. Now be careful not to drink wine or strong drink or to eat anything unclean, for you shall conceive and bear a son. No razor is to come on his head, for the boy shall be a Nazarite to God from birth. It is he who shall begin to deliver Israel from the hand of the Philistines." Then the woman came and told her husband, "A man of God came to me, and his appearance was like that of an angel of God, most awe-inspiring. I did not ask him where he came from, and he did not tell me his name, but he said to me, 'You shall conceive and bear a son. So then drink no wine or strong drink, and eat nothing unclean, for the boy shall be a Nazarite to God from birth to the day of his death.' Then Manoah entreated the Lord and said, 'O Lord, I pray, let the man of God whom you sent come to us again and teach us what we are to do concerning the boy who will be born.' God listened to Manoah, and the angel of God came again to the woman as she sat in the field, but her husband Manoah was not with her. So the woman ran quickly and told her husband, 'The man who came to me the other day has appeared to me.' Manoah got up and followed his wife and came to the man and said to him, 'Are you the man who spoke to this woman?' And he said, 'I am.' Then Manoah said, 'Now when your words come true, what is to be the boy's rule of life? What is he to do?' The angel of the Lord said to Manoah, 'Let the woman give heed to all that I said to her. She may not eat of anything that comes from the vine. She is not to drink wine or strong drink or any unclean thing. She is to observe everything that I commanded her.' Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, 'Allow us to detain you and prepare a kid for you.' The angel of the Lord said to Manoah, 'If you detain me, I will not eat your food. But if you want to prepare a burnt offering, then offer it to the Lord.' For Manoah did not know that he was the angel of the Lord. Then Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, 'What is your name, so that we may honor you when your words come true?' But the angel of the Lord said to him, 'Why do you ask my name? It is too wonderful.' So Manoah took the kid with the grain offering and offered it on the rock to the Lord, to him who works wonders. When the flame went up toward heaven from the altar, the angel of the Lord ascended in the flame of the altar, while Manoah and his wife looked on, and they fell on their faces to the ground. The angel of the Lord did not appear again to Manoah and his wife. Then Manoah realized that it was the angel of the Lord. And Manoah said to his wife, 'We shall surely die, for we have seen God.' But his wife said to him, 'If the Lord had meant to kill us, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and a grain offering at our hands, or shown us all these things, or now announced to us such things as these.' The woman bore a son and named him Samson. The boy grew, and the Lord blessed him." So I don't know if you remember, but several decades back, in 1993, Mel Gibson starred in a movie called The Man Without a Face. And if I had to give a title to this passage that we just read, I would title it The Mother Without a Name. So most of us, especially if we've been in church for a while, we know a lot about Samson. He was one of the, most well-known judges in Israel. His superhuman strength was lodged in his hair. And, he ruled in Israel for about 20 years. I think I already mentioned that. And he was most known for helping Israel begin to defeat their neighbor, the Philistines, kind of the bullies that were surrounding them. But the thing we don't really know much about is Samson's mother. Her story tends to be dwarfed by his story. Yet, like every mother, she plays a crucial role in her child's life. So from what we just read, what can we learn about her story? The very first thing is that she's nameless. She's simply called Manoah's wife, the woman, or she. And we don't really know why she's nameless. The idea is just that at the time this text took place and the time period it was written in, it was a man's world. And to quote the famous James Brown, this is a man's world, but it wouldn't be nothing without a woman or a girl. It was a kind of pitiful James Brown impression, though. I need to work on that a little bit better. She doesn't have a name. She bears no name, but she's anything but unimportant. She's not a passive character in the story. If anything, she's central to the action in the story. The second thing we learn is that she's barren. Okay, she's unable to have children. She's sterile. The third thing we learn is that she's childless. And this might seem like the same thing as barren, but the text is pretty clear that she's both barren and childless. It's not like she had a bunch of kids and then all of a sudden could no longer conceive. The author wants us to know that she had no ability to have a child. And during this time period, being barren and childless was really seen as like a divine disfavor, that God somehow had frowned upon you. And so not having children and being barren left Manoah's wife in a really unenviable and even vulnerable and kind of a socially low position. This was a woman's sole role during this time, was to be able to have children. And she would have experienced tremendous shame, and this shame would have been shared by the couple. Number 4, she's worthy of divine visitation and communication. She's visited by an angel twice. And during the first visit, the angel of the Lord announces, you're going to conceive a son. This is what you need to abstain from, and this is who your son is going to be. And after that, she goes to tell her husband, and Manoah doesn't quite believe her. And so Manoah asked the Lord directly, hey, Lord, can you please send that angel back because I'm not sure my wife is relaying all the right info to me. Sound familiar, ladies? Maybe a little? And so anyways, the angel appears again, but it doesn't appear to Manoah. It appears to his wife once more. And that's the scene you see depicted on the slide here. There's a lot of irony here, but it's mostly ironic because, again, women were seen as lesser than in this society and not really worthy of this type of divine instruction or communication. Yet it's Manoah's wife, nameless and childless, that gets this divine revelation, not her husband, the head of the household. Number 5, she's central to her son's future as a Nazarite. The angel commissions her specifically to fulfill the Nazarite vow. And a Nazarite was just someone who was separate or set apart for God. And so they were to abstain from wine, strong drink, anything from the vine. They couldn't cut their hair, and they weren't supposed to come in contact with anything dead. And so Manoah's wife very much assumes the role or the character, the lifestyle that her son is to take on when he's born. Number 6, she's spiritually perceptive and astute. While Manoah calls the angel a man, and on several times actually asks for his name, his wife recognizes the divine messenger right away. Okay, it's Manoah's wife that understands what's happening throughout this story. Number 7, she responds in faith and not fear. This woman has 2 angelic encounters, the latter of which ends with the angel going up in a flame. I don't know about you, but I've never experienced that. And if I did, I think I'd be a little bit freaked out, okay? And Manoah is a little bit scared, right? He thinks the Lord is going to kill them. And she's the one that's like, hey, honey, just chill, okay? If God just promised us a son, I doubt he's going to strike us down right now. Number 8, she names her son. And this is, again, another sign of God's esteem for her, a nameless woman in a man's world. So Paulette Stamper refers to Manoah's wife as unnamed but not anonymous. I really like this phrase a lot. As we just saw, Manoah's wife is central to the story. She plays a crucial role in giving life to her son. However, perhaps more than that, the crucial role she plays is actually in God's story. This is what makes her a biblical heroine. This is why she's included in the larger biblical story and why her unique individual story has even been preserved. We didn't read verse 1, but if we had, we would have discovered that because of Israel's evil deeds, God had handed them over to the Philistines for 40 years. And this is really the context that we need to read Manoah's wife's story in. She lived in a culture that was dominated by an enemy, that was hostile to Israel's faith and hostile to Israel's God. They didn't follow Israel's God. And Israel's hope for salvation from this domination was in a barren, nameless woman. There's no doubt that Manoah's wife desperately wanted a child. And for those of you who have struggled to conceive or know those who have, you can deeply empathize with her. Yet her very personal desire and experience is grafted onto God's larger purposes and cannot be fully understood or appreciated outside of those. For this reason, Paulette Stamper summarizes Manoah's wife's story in this way. Israel was in big trouble, and they needed a big solution, and God revealed a big plan to a wife who displayed big faith. Like I mentioned earlier, we know so much about Samson, Israel's deliverer, yet we often fail to recognize the importance of the mother who delivered the deliverer. Manoah's wife believed God's promise, delivered through the angel, that she would conceive a son who would begin to save Israel from Philistine oppression. And while we know nothing about Samson's early childhood or adolescence, it's missing from the biblical text. It doesn't say anything. I can guarantee that his mom had to continually choose to believe God's promise. Through Samson's 1-year-old emerging independence and his 2- and 3-year-old tantrums, through the awkwardness of years 11 to 13, through thinking he was right about everything as a teenager, to arguments about why he couldn't even cut his hair or drink wine at a family member's wedding. These are all my own musings. But I believe that like mothers present day, Samson's mother probably struggled with the daily monotonies and battles of raising children. Each phase of Samson's life brought new challenges, which no doubt caused his mother to at times doubt her abilities and question her role. However, I also believe she was able to overcome this doubt and questioning because she believed her own unique individual story, a story that feels challenging and thankless and monotonous at times, was still part of God's larger salvation story. Though Manoah's wife's story, like I mentioned earlier, it's an ancient one. It was written in the 12th century BC, took place in the 12th century BC, over 3,000 years ago. I think it's still one that we can relate to today for these reasons. Like Manoah's wife, we live in a culture hostile to God, whether we recognize it or not. Being a faithful follower is often met with opposition, disregarded as an ancient way of thinking, or looked down upon as mere indoctrination rather than truth. And this can lead to fear and doubt, especially when raising children. Yet like Manoah's wife, for you mothers out there, we can respond in faith to these kind of hostile surroundings rather than fear. And though Manoah's wife was nameless, I think many mothers today can feel nameless. And one reason is that the daily experience of motherhood is difficult, if not impossible to describe, to give words to. In her book, Love Warrior, the author Glennon Doyle attempts to kind of articulate what raising 3 young children looks like. And this is what she has to say. My day was a lifetime. It was the best of times and the worst of times. I was both lonely and never alone. I was simultaneously bored out of my skull and completely overwhelmed. I was saturated with touch, desperate to get the baby off of me, and the second I put her down, I yearned to smell her sweet skin again. This day required more than I'm physically and emotionally capable of, while requiring nothing from my brain. I had thoughts today, ideas, real things to say, and no one to hear them. I felt manic all day, alternating between love and fury. At least once an hour, I looked at their faces and thought I might not survive the tenderness of my love for them. The next moment, I was furious. I felt like a dormant volcano, steady on the outside but ready to explode and spew hot lava at any moment. And then I noticed that Anna's foot doesn't fit into her onesie anymore, and I started to panic at the reminder that this will be over soon, that it's fleeting, that this hardest time of my life is supposed to be the best time of my life, that this brutal time is also the most beautiful time. Am I enjoying it enough? Am I missing the best time of my life? Am I too tired to be properly in love with my children? I'm not complaining, so please don't try to fix it. I wouldn't have my day any other way. I'm just saying it's a really hard thing to describe, an entire day with lots of babies. It's far too much and not even close to enough. I think another reason that mothers can feel nameless sometimes is because their daily activities and sacrifices often go unnoticed and unrecognized. In the daily drudgeries of changing diapers, wiping noses, keeping sane in the midst of a 2-year-old or a 15-year-old meltdown, doing a 5th load of laundry, celebrating a child's first attempt at using the big potty, or running children to different activities on opposite sides of town, mothers can begin to feel the story of our larger culture that the monotony and sacrifice of motherhood are unimportant, and therefore what they're giving their lives for is unimportant. Their unique individual stories are often dwarfed by what society deems most important: power, success, money, status, ambition, achievement. And motherhood is none of these. Motherhood isn't an esteemed profession according to our current society. Motherhood is very much lived out in the trenches. It can be thankless and tireless, unappreciated. In many ways, some in society look down upon it. They see it as lowly. It's not something young women are even encouraged towards anymore. It's not a choice our society always celebrates. Therefore, for those who are mothers, I think a lot of times they can feel like their daily actions are pretty unremarkable. However, may I remind you that even if you feel nameless, you are far from anonymous. Jordan Peterson reminds us that the fate of the world rests on each new infant. And Manoah's wife's story reminds us that the fate of the world rests upon faithful mothers that bring these infants into existence, who nurture and guide these infants through childhood into adulthood. Her story reminds us that God esteems women, that belief in and faithfulness to God's promises are found in brave women and mothers. It reminds us that women are spiritually astute and the recipients of God's revelation. It also reminds us that motherhood is sacred, that giving birth is sacred, that raising children is sacred. Manoah's wife's story reminds mothers that what they do absolutely matters, that what might feel like profoundly unrecognized actions on a daily basis are actually extremely profoundly important work. Like Samson's mother, you are crucial in the lives of your children. What you model, how you act, what you say will impact who they become. You are not passive bystanders. Like Samson's mother, God has commissioned you to raise your children with purpose. He has entrusted the next generation to you. In church, we often hear about the man's role as the head of the household and the importance of fatherhood. And we honor and respect that. Men are vital to the upbringing of their children. That's a Father's Day sermon, though. This is Mother's Day. But in this story we just read of the legendary strong man Samson, God seeks out and commissions the soon-to-be mother. All of the angel's directives are given to Manoah's wife. Above all, this passage reminds us that motherhood is grafted into God's larger purposes. It is for this reason that Eve, the very first woman in the Bible, means life or living. From the very beginning, God chose to bring about his redemptive story through mothers. Samson's mother's unique individual story is part of God's grand narrative, and so is yours. So there was a Similac commercial a while back, a formula commercial, called The Sisterhood of Motherhood. And Manoah's wife was in the motherhood of barren, childless women who God called to bring about his will. If you think about Sarah, Rebecca, Hannah, Elizabeth, they were all barren and childless as well. This was her unique individual story, but one that existed within a larger story. For those of you here today, whether you are current moms or future moms, It's unlikely that you're going to be like visited by an angel in a field, or that you're going to be called to deliver a future deliverer like Samson. However, just like all the moms I used to work with at EPU, you all have your own unique individual story of mess-ups, fears, joys, struggles, concerns, triumphs. And your story is grafted into the larger sisterhood of motherhood, but more importantly than that, it's grafted into God's larger purposes and cannot be understood outside of those. Regardless of how young of a mother you are or how old of a mother you are, how young or old your children are, whether you're a biological mother or not, your story is special and unique. And I encourage you today to see it as such. God esteems mothers, not just on Mother's Day, but every day. This awesome task and responsibility isn't meant to feel burdensome or like a heavy, weighty yoke or to-do list of how to raise our children, but rather a gift and acknowledgement that God honors this divine role you have chosen to take on. May all of you here this morning, especially for those of you who might be feeling nameless or a little bit lowly in the daily drudgeries and monotony of motherhood, recognize that you join the ranks of Manoah's wife. In being a mother, you are called and blessed to bring about God's will through the nurturing and raising of your children. And God honors you today. Let's pray.